friends, welcome or welcome back to the Infinite Library, and today I'm bringing you what I believe is my sixth, I've lost track to be honest at this point, the next video in my Reading the Goodreads Choice Awards, and this one is going to be two genres that I don't really read. So this is going to be me going in very blind and really not having a clue if I'm going to like these genres or not. I have read books from these genres before, but they're not books that I ever typically go for. So we're actually going to be doing historical versus humour. The humour category is an interesting one because Goodreads actually removed it in this year. They've realised that it's not really a great genre and that it's more of a type of book than it is a genre specifically. So they've actually just removed it altogether. And having looked at what is in the humour category, I understand because a lot of these are memoirs or they're just non-fiction, and humor is so subjective, so it's very all over the place. Historical is also another one that I feel like it can bleed into other genres so much. I mean, we have the winner of the historical genre, it's actually Wayward, and this is a fantasy as well as being historical fiction, and then they often kind of like go into like literary fiction as well, or like mystery thriller, that kind of thing. So they're both kind of weird genres, I think, that are not ones that I would typically go for. But I am excited to see what I think of them. So let's go ahead and pick the books. So let us pick the humour books. This is probably going to be one of the hardest categories for me, not going to lie, because I don't really read a lot of humour books. So I'm going to have a look at them all, but part of me thinks that I'm just going to end up picking the top three here. I actually do want to read one of these already, as you can see, but I have not read any of these books at all. So yeah, I'll look at them all. I don't really know if many of them appeal, to be honest. I'm really subjective when it comes to humour. So the winner is Being Henry, The Fonz and Beyond from Henry Winkler, who I've never heard of before, not gonna lie. He's apparently an Emmy Award-winning actor, comedian, author, producer, director. He was known for his role as the Fonz in Happy Days, but I've never seen Happy Days. So let's read about him, I guess. And this kind of sounds like it sounds like a memoir rather than it being like an actual comedy book, but it won. So, and it's still got a fairly high rating over here, like 4.14. That's not bad. But I don't know if I'm gonna get anything out of this, given that I don't know who the guy is, but I'm hoping the book will still stand up on its own regardless. He is widely regarded as the nicest man in Hollywood. Henry shares in this achingly vulnerable memoir the disheartening truth of his childhood, the difficulties of a life with severe dyslexia, the pressures of a role that takes on a life of its own, and the path forward once your wildest dreams seems behind you. Since the glorious era of Happy Days fame, Henry has endeared himself to new generations with roles in such adored shows as Arrested Development, Parks and Recreation, and Barry. I've not seen any of those. Okay, so he was very typecast basically as the Fonz. Yeah, it's a memoir. It sounds alright. I'm not particularly interested, but it's got high ratings, so I'll give it a go. Next, we have Leslie Effing Jones by Leslie Jones. This is another memoir. Again, I've not heard of this person before. I assume, are they a comedian? Yes, American stand-up comedian and actress. Hey you guys, it's Leslie. I'm excited to share my story with you. Now, I'm going to be honest, some of the details might be vague because the bitch is 55 and she smoked a ton of weed. But while bits might be a touch hazy, I can promise you the underlying truth is real. Whether I'm talking about my childhood growing up in the South, my early stand-up days driving from gig to gig through the darkest parts of our country and praying I wouldn't get murdered, what Chris Rock told Lorne Michaels, that time I wanted to shoot with Peter Goldberg on SNL, and yeah, I'll tell you all about Ghostbusters and the Nudes and Supermarket Sweep and The Daily Show. I'm sharing it all in these pages. It's not easy being a woman in comedy, especially when you're a tall-ass black woman with a trumpet voice. I have to fight so that no one takes me for granted and no one takes advantage. These are the stories that explain why. Sounds quite interesting, actually. Again, not something I would have taken for a humour book, but because it's a memoir, but also because it's by a comedian, I guess it kind of makes sense. So this one, I think I'm probably going to have a good time with. Okay, this is the only one that I'm already interested in reading. I do have a copy of it. It's called Sure, I'll Join Your Cult, a memoir of mental illness and the quest to belong anywhere by Maria Bamford. This is another memoir, but basically this is done by the stand-up comedian Maria Bamford, and I think she just went through stuff, basically. She has forever fought to find a place to belong, from struggling with an eating disorder as a child of the 1980s to navigating a career in the arts. She has tried just about every method possible to not only be a part of the world, but to want to be part of it. Every single various group she's joined, every hypomanic episode, and every easy 1 to 3 step recipe for fudge and in between. Singular and inimitable, Banford's memoir explores what it means to keep going and to be a member of society of any group she's invited to, despite not being very good at it. In turn, she hopes to transform isolating experiences into a comedy that will make you feel less alone without turning into a cult following. So yeah, I literally did actually think this was about her experiences like in a cult when she was young, but I guess that's not the case. But it does sound quite interesting. It's a lot about mental health, which I think will be interesting. So yeah, I guess that's my third pick. I'll just go through them all quickly to see what they're like and see if any kind of go up on my radar at all. Tough Titties on Living Your Best Life When You're the Worst. We've got another, memoir from a celebrity, various coming of age stories, various insights on our confusing self-helpy culture. Yeah, it sounds alright, but all of these are memoirs. Is there any of these that aren't memoirs? Okay, we've got some essays here. I love the title for this, I've got to say. I've seen it before and it never fails to make me laugh. So this is a bunch of essays called Quietly Hostile. Who is this woman then? Oh, she's actually, I think, an actual author. I like how her blurb says, I'm a slow reader. Oh, it looks like she's involved in Hollywood, but life is not as glamorous as it seems to be, is kind of what it suggests. It doesn't really give me a whole lot. I still don't know anything about who she is. I'm just gonna Google her, because I feel like I don't know any of these people, which is quite hilarious, but I think this is not a comedian. Oh, never mind, she is a comedian. Basically everything in the humour category, just stuff by comedians. A Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is another memoir. I feel like this was not really very funny from what I've heard. Yeah, this is literally just another memoir about this woman. It's her only book. I assume she's probably famous. It does have autism rep, which is quite interesting. Again, it's just another memoir. Unruly, A History of England's Kings and Queens by David Mitchell. This sounds like it is just a history book, except is this like the adult version of Horrible Histories? David Mitchell explores how England's monarchs, while acting as feared rulers, firmly guiding their subjects' destinies, were in reality a bunch of lucky sods who were mostly as silly and weird in real life as they appear today in their portraits. What happens behind the scenes, I suppose, in history that maybe is not really given that much airtime because we just look at the glamorous stuff. Sounds alright. XOXO Cody. I've literally only heard of this because of Becca and the books, because she loves Peloton. So I know this is a Peloton instructor. So this is another memoir. It is an LGBT one. He is a Peloton instructor. And I'm assuming it's just how he got to being like this big influencer in that. So I don't personally have an interest though. The World Record Book of Racist Stories by Emma Ruffin and Lacey Lamar. Oh, this is a comedian and her sister. That's quite fun. Collection of hilarious intergenerational anecdotes full of absurd detail about everyday experiences of racism. See, this sounds like they're trying to go for funny, but I don't know. It feels like it could be quite depressing as well. Black Friend Essays by Aziwe. This is another comedian. From the looks of it, she made a name for herself staring interviewees in the eye and asking, how many black friends do you have? She's an expert at making people squirm, coming right out and asking the tough questions about race and racism that our culture has made white people experts at dancing around. Sounds quite interesting, actually. Oh, it's very short as well. It's only 190 pages. This is her only book, yeah. Intriguing. Then we have Congratulations, the Best is Over by R. Eric Thomas. This is essays, but also kind of a memoir. After going viral, reading the chaotic political news, having one too many awkward social encounters, and coming to terms with his intersecting identities, R. Eric Thomas is ready to live his best life, or if not, at least his best-ish life. It's just him exploring doing various things, I guess. From attending his 20-year high school reunion and discovering another person's face on his name badge, to splattering an urgent care room with blood a la The Shining, to being terrorised by a plague of gay frogs who've overtaken his backyard. That actually sounds quite funny, not gonna lie. Honestly, kind of a contender. That's probably the only other one that I'm like, yeah, maybe a contender, if I'm really not feeling any of these three. Also strong female character, I think probably is too. How to Stay Married, the most insane love story ever told by Harrison Scott Key. So he's won other prizes for humour. I assume that means he's also a comedian. He finds out that his wife is having an affair. What will he do? Armed with a little bit of sense of humour and a hunger for the truth, Harrison embarks on a hellish journey into his past, seeking answers to the riddles of faith and forgiveness. Not really interested in that, not gonna lie. It was an ugly couch anyway, and other thoughts on moving forward. That sounds quite good actually. By Elizabeth Passarella. She writes essay collections, so I'm assuming that's what this is. Oh, she's a columnist. Okay. Staying sane whilst navigating change. Oh, she's deciding whether or not to let go of this couch because it's kind of a family heirloom. And yeah, it's just about her life, I think, otherwise. Everybody's favourite, Tales from the World's Worst Perfectionist. So we have an influencer, I assume here, Lillian Stone, tackling the relentless pursuit of perfection while navigating growing up in the early 2000s. Still about mental health from the looks of it, religious trauma. Again, it's a memoir. Oh, surely you can't be serious. The story of airplanes. This is the movie Airplane. I'm not really a big fan of it, unfortunately. That humour doesn't really work for me, but this is a book about that, basically. But I'm not really a fan, so I'm not going to be looking into that one. Then we have Misfit, Growing Up Awkward in the 80s. So this is the 90s. I would be all over this, but I'm a 90s child, so I feel like this isn't going to quite hit me as well. This is by a comedian again, just about growing older and growing up, basically. Then we have Unreliable Narrator, Me, Myself, and Imposter Syndrome. This one could be quite interesting, actually. So she's a comedian as well. Essays about depression and anxiety, I guess it kind of is about, and self-doubt. Open these last three. I suspect these are all also just memoirs. America the Beautiful, One Woman in a Borrowed Prius on the Road Most Travelled. Yeah, here we go, by Bryce Robinson. She's also a comedian, and it sounds like she just takes a road trip, basically, and this is about her experience. Sounds quite interesting, only because I also want to do a road trip across America at some point or another. It's just meditations on that, basically. Then we've got Alexander Petrie's US History, Important American Documents. She's written other books. It's satire, basically. It's just looking at various documents in America, probably various weird documents. I can't say I'm interested at all, not gonna lie. Okay, and the final one is Not Funny, Essays on Life, Comedy, Culture, etc. Not gonna lie, I really thought that was the woman from Orange is the New Black for a second. So this is essays again. Oh, she's a stand-up comedian. It's a feminist kind of thing. It's just stories about her life and all that, basically. Not a lot, honestly, that I'm genuinely interested in. Congratulations, The Best is Over sounds interesting. Black Friend, I think, could be quite good, just because I think it could be quite challenging. Unruly possibly sounds interesting, but I'm worried it's just going to be a dry history book, and we know I've not really enjoyed those. Strong female character sounds interesting, but yeah, I'm going to stick with the top three for this, I think. And then if I'm really not vibing with any of these, I'm going to pick up one of these three. Strong female character, Black Friend, Congratulations, The Best is Over are my backups, I think, if I'm really struggling. Okay, so all that is left is to pick the historical books. So obviously I'm going to be picking Wayward because it is the winner. It was also the winner of debut, but I purposely didn't pick it for that because I knew it won historical, and I'd rather pick it for its own specific genre category. So I'm actually really excited about this. This is a magical realism fantasy, and it is about three women across three different timelines. Kate in 2019, Alpha in 1619, and Violet in 1942. So yeah, it sounds really interesting. I do love the American cover a lot. The UK cover is really ugly. This is the UK hardback. What is this? Honestly, nothing. Nothing at all is relevant. I don't mind the UK paperback, although the pink is incredibly garish. But overall, the American hardback is the way to go, I think. But I'll be reading the paperback. So I've already got a copy of this ready. I'm looking forward to reading it. So let's pick the other options. Obviously, I have to go for the runner-up, which, as you can see, I may have already started. I got a head start on this one because you will see when I do my vlog updates, It's freaking massive. This is like over 700 pages. This is a chonker of historical fiction. It's by Abraham Verghese, and it is set in South India, spanning the years 1900 to 1977, following 3 generations of a family that suffer a peculiar affliction. In every generation, at least one person dies by drowning, and in Kerala, water is everywhere. Kerala is on India's Malabar coast. At the turn of the century, a 12-year-old girl from Kerala's Christian community, grieving the death of her father, is sent by boat to her wedding, where she will meet her 40-year-old husband for the first time. Yeah, the arranged marriage is kind of a big part of this, but dealt with better than I would have assumed from what I can tell of what I read of the book so far. I'm like 150 pages in, I think, at this point. From this unforgettable new beginning, the young girl and future matriarch, Bigamachi, will witness unspeakable changes over the span of her extraordinary life, full of joy and triumph, as well as hardship and loss, her faith and love the only constant. So we're basically following this girl mostly, I believe, for the book, although we are probably going to take some tangents into other storylines. But yeah, this is more a literary fiction, I believe, in tone. Still sitting at a really good rating at a 4.4 star. Really freaking long. So I will be reading it though, because it is the runner-up. Now we have to look through all the others and see which one we're gonna pick. I'd say like basically the top 10 after these two are basically all fairly similar in terms of votes. They're all like in the 20 to 30,000 sort of range, and then we drop down horrendously here to like 7,000, going all the way to just 3,000. It's funny because I feel like this is a Waterstones book of the month right now, this one that like has last place. Okay, so let's have a look at all these one by one and pick which one I'm going to read. We have Lady Tan's Circle of Women by Lisa C. Still pretty respectable rating. An immersive historical novel inspired by the true story of a woman physician in 15th century China. Oh, that kind of gives me Apothecary Diaries vibes. A little bit, because that is about a woman who like is an apothecarist, which is kind of like as close to a physician as she's gonna get. According to Confucius, an educated woman is a worthless woman, but Tan Yunjan, born into an elite family yet haunted by death, separations, and loneliness, is being raised by her grandparents to be of use. Her grandmother is one of only a handful of female doctors in China, and she teaches young Shan the pillars of Chinese medicine, the 4 examinations: looking, listening, touching, and asking, something a man can never do with a female patient. From a young age, young Shan learns about women's illnesses, many of which relate to childbearing, alongside a young midwife in training, Mei Ling. The two girls find fast friendship and a mutual purpose. Despite the prohibition that a doctor should never touch blood while a midwife comes in frequent contact with it, and they vow to be forever friends, sharing each other's joys and struggles. No mud, no lotus, they tell, from adversity beauty can bloom. That made no sense to me. Probably makes sense in the book, but that was confusing to me in terms of the synopsis. Anyway, young Shan sent to an arranged marriage. Her mother-in-law forbids her from seeing Mei Ling and from helping the women and girls in the household. So yeah, it's about her trying to break free of these traditions and still become a doctor, basically. So it does actually sound really interesting. It is a reimagining of the life of one person who was remarkable in the Ming Dynasty and will be considered remarkable today. This is based on a real person. I don't know who that is exactly. I'm not sure, but it does sound really interesting. I like the sound of this. Like, so much of the historical I can kind of already see just from looking down looks kind of just like World War in America or Britain kind of stuff. This historical, I'm assuming, is going to be a mix of UK and America. Covenant of Water is India, so I would like to get another not American one, ideally. But let's have a look at the rest. The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Set in 1972 in Pennsylvania. Oh, people digging for a housing development find a human skeleton. It's a long-held secret that has been kept for decades by the residents of Chicken Hill, the dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans live side by side. We meet Mosh and Shona. Chicken Hill was where they lived when Krona ran the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, which served the neighborhood's quirky collection of blacks and European immigrants helped by her husband, Mosh, a Romanian-born theatre owner who integrated the town's first dance hall. When the state came looking for a deaf black child, claiming that the boy needs to be institutionalized, Chicken Hill's residents banded together to keep the boy safe. It sounds like this is about a lot of stuff. So it's a mystery around the skeleton, the boy, and what part the town played in it. Does actually sound quite interesting, but it's America again, and although it does sound culturally interesting, I'm not as interested as Zlatan. I have a suspicion that these next three are all gonna be turn of the century kind of thing. Yeah, there we go. So keep your pen and books. Inspired by a true story of an underground library in World War II Warsaw. I am saying right now, I refuse to read anything that's got something to do with World War I or World War II. I just found it really depressing. I really don't like books set in world wars. I know there's probably some very good books, but for me personally, for my picks for the historical, I don't want to read about the world. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to pick this one, but this is about a woman called Zofia. I believe she tries to salvage a bunch of books to hide them away and start a clandestine book club. It actually does sound quite good. I like that they're basically going to be using the books as weapons, apparently it's saying. So as destruction rages, Zofia must fight to save her friend and preserve her culture and community using the only weapon they have left of literature. But it also sounds incredibly depressing, so I'm not reading that. Then we have a book called The Echo of Old Books. Love me a book about a book. This is about a rare book dealer called Ashlyn Greer. She can feel the echoes of books' previous owners. Oh, it's another fantasy. Okay. Ashlyn discovers a pair of beautifully bound volumes that appear to have never been published. Their authors apparently have some sort of tragic romance. So Ashlyn gets caught up in this literary mystery. Sounds really, yeah, as you can see, I've already put it as one to read. It does sound really interesting. Because it's got fantasy elements, which we already have in Wayward, I'm not going to pick it. Okay, now we have The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. This is set in 1950s America. A 15-year-old Ruby is on track to becoming the first in her family to attend college, in spite of having a mother more interested in keeping a man than raising a daughter. But a taboo love affair threatens to pull her back down into poverty and desperation that's been passed on to her like birthright. And then we also meet somebody else called Eleanor, who meets someone at Howard University. He hails from DC's elite wealthy black families, and his parents don't just let anyone into their fold. I've got no clue what these two things have to do with one another. Apparently they will collide. I really have no interest in this. It just sounds a bit like a domestic drama, a little bit like what I read in the literary fiction category. Oh, I forgot what it's called, this book, and I didn't really enjoy that. Let's move on. Next we have The Wind Knows My Name by Isabel Allende. This is a translated historical fiction. Oh, also World War II, but set in Vietnam, part of it. Okay, some of it's set in Vietnam in 1938, where we follow someone called Samuel, whose father disappeared. Samuel's mother secured a spot for him on the last train out of Nazi-occupied... Oh, Vienna! Sorry, not Vietnam. I completely misread. And then we go to 2019 Arizona, where we meet Anita Diaz. It looks like they basically are like two parallel journeys of a child trying to escape occupation of their land. Her case is assigned to a young social worker. Together they discover that Anita has another family member in the United States, Letitia Cordera, who is employed at the home of now 86-year-old Samuel Adler. It's a love letter to children who survive the most unfathomable dangers and never stop dreaming. I like the premise, but again, as I said, I don't want to read anything that's to do with the World War, so I'm not going to read it. Okay, this book was also in the debut novel category. Did you hear about Kitty Carr by Crystal Smith Paul? This is a multi-generational saga that traverses the glamour of old Hollywood and the seductive draw of modern-day showbiz. So this is about Kitty Carr, a white icon of the silver screen. She dies and bequeaths her estate to the St. John sisters, three young, wealthy black women. It prompts questions. Sounds a little bit like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, like it's going to be going into her past, and I guess why she owes these people money, I suppose. Because of that, I want to read it because it's giving me that vibe. But do I want to read it more than I want to read Lady Tan? If it's like Evelyn Hugo, it's kind of like a comfy soap drama sort of book. Maybe not got a lot more to it though. On to the next ones. So this one looks like a potential World War One. Oh, it's set in Canada though. That's nice. Looking for Jane by Heather Marshall. It's another debut novel, though it didn't make it into the debut category, tellingly. It's about three women whose lives are bound together by a long-lost letter, a mother's love, and a secret network of women fighting for the right to choose. So we're following Angela in 2017, who finds a letter which contains a confession. Her search takes her back to the 1970s when a group of daring women operating an illegal underground abortion network, known only by its whispered codename Jane. Okay, this is going to be heavy books then. So yeah, we also then follow a teenager in 1971 who gives up her baby for adoption and then finds the Jane network, and then 1980, a 20-year-old called Nancy who also becomes pregnant and finds the Jane network. It sounds very heavy and not really something I want to read, unfortunately, although I'm sure it's also very important. But okay, next we have Go as a River by Shelley Reid. This is set in 1948, so just after the Second World War. Victoria Nash delivers late season peaches from her family farm set amid the wild beauty of Colorado. As she heads into her village, a disheveled stranger stops to ask her the way. How she chooses to answer will unknowingly alter the course of both their young lives. I'm gonna guess there's a romance or something that goes on. She has to make a decision, a heart-wrenching coming-of-age story, and a drama of unfurling power. This gives me nothing. To be honest, I have no clue what this is about, so we're gonna skip it. Okay, The Paris Daughter. This is another one set in the Second World War. What did I tell you? Paris, 1939. It's about two young mothers called Elise and Juliette who make friends. Elise becomes a target of the German occupation, and she entrusts Juliette with the only precious thing in her life, her daughter. So Juliette has a little bookshop, and when a bomb falls in their neighborhood, however, Juliette's world is destroyed along with it. So Elise then wants to reunite with her daughter once the world is ending, finds the bookstore in rubble, and is now, I guess, looking for Juliette. I like the more human take on this story. Like, it sounds less like it's about the war than it is about the relationship between these three people. Also, still not something I really am interested in reading, which sounds awful, but it is what it is. Let's look at the next four on the list. I feel like Jesmyn Ward was someone who was on the New York Times Top 100. World War II, once again. The Secret Book of Flora Lee. I apparently want to read this one though. Let's find out what it's about. A woman discovers a rare book that has connections to her past, long-held secrets about her missing sister, and their childhood spent in the English countryside during World War II are revealed. So it's about 14-year-old Hazel and her younger sister during the war in London. The older sister kind of makes this fantasy land to distract the younger sister, but then the young sister vanishes. The older sister blames herself for the disappearance and carries that guilt into adulthood. 20 years later, Hazel has moved on, basically. Then she finds a book which is about the imaginary world she created for her sister. So I guess this possibly could mean her sister is still alive, which sounds quite interesting, actually. I do like the sound of that. So if it's 1939, it's going to be set in like the 60s, I guess, then, or late 50s, early 60s or something. It does sound more interesting, I've got to say, so I guess that's an option. Then we have Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward. This is a magical realism book, a reimagining of American slavery. It's a journey from the rice fields of the Carolinas to the slave markets of New Orleans. Annis is sold south by the white enslaver who fathered her. She seeks comfort from memories of her mother and stories of her African warrior grandmother, and it's just about her journey, I guess. Again, it does actually sound interesting, but it's America again, it's slavery, and I'm trying to read books that are not necessarily going to be depressing. So although this does sound interesting, it's not one I want to pick. Then we have Hang the Moon. This is about a young woman in Virginia during the Prohibition. Woman called Sally, who is the daughter of the richest man in town, basically. She's born into comfort and privilege. Her mother died in a violent argument with her father, and then her father remarries and has a son called Eddie. Sally tries to teach young Eddie to be more like their father because he's quite timid, and then, he gets an accident. And she is kind of like turned out, basically. So she returns when she's a young adult tries to return to the house, I guess. Sounds okay, but again, it sounds just like a domestic drama, which is not the most interesting. Okay, oh, here we go. Another World War II book. This is a coming-of-age story called Beyond That the Sea by Laura Spence Ash. Tells the stories of two families living through World War II on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean and the shy, irresistible young woman who will call them both her own. I'm already not interested, so let's leave that straight away. Okay, the last 4 books then we have. As we know, I probably won't pick because I don't tend to pick as far down in this list unless something's really calling to me. So we have River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer. This is another slavery book. I think I've heard of this actually. Yeah, I want to read it. The master of the Providence plantation in Barbados gathers his slaves and announces the king has decreed an end to slavery. Oh, yes, I do remember this. This is the one where like the Emancipation Act happens and he basically says, oh, you all work for me now. You're not my slaves. So they can't leave. So this woman called Rachel runs away and tries to find her children who were all sold. And it's about her journey to find her kids, basically. And I think we also find out the stories of the children. It does actually sound really interesting, this one, I've got to say. So I might actually keep that as an option because it does sound good. Banyan Moon I've heard of as well. Oh, this was also in the debut novel category. So this is about a woman called Anne Tran. She finds out her grandmother has passed away, and so she returns home to Florida to face her estranged mother Huang. And it's a domestic drama, I think. Under the same roof for the first time in years, mother and daughter must face the simmering questions of their past and their uncertain futures. So we also get to see grandmother's story as well, about how she survived the Vietnam War and immigrated to America. So it does actually sound really interesting, but it's still a domestic drama, which I'm not hugely interested in. Then we have The Vaster Wild. It's about a servant girl who escapes a colonial settlement and goes to the wilderness. She carries nothing with her but her wits, a few possessions, and the spark of God that burns hot within her. This is an adventure story about a girl living in nature, I guess. It's kind of what it sounds like. Sounds okay, but I don't know, not massively interesting. Okay, final book, Northwood. This is about a house in the woods of New England, Northwoods, I guess, is where we get that from, told through the lives of those who inhabit it across the centuries. So it's various people, basically, that live in this house, which is kind of a cool idea, to be honest, for a story. Shows the myriad of magical ways in which we're connected to our environment and to one another across time, language, and space. Interesting. Because it's the last place, I'm not going to pick it, but like, look at that. For last place, it's doing pretty good for itself. Like, good on it, honestly. There are a couple I'm interested in. I am interested in Echo of Old Books, but it doesn't feel historical enough to me. I like the thought of Lady Tam because we're really going further back in time, and it's about something I don't really know about. Another reason why World War II stuff doesn't appeal to me and American slavery is because it's kind of treading territory I kind of am familiar with. Kitty Carr I think would be interesting, but it doesn't really give me historical vibes. It just gives me like biography vibe. Flora Lee sounds very interesting as well, and I do like the sound of Banyan Moon and River Sing Me Home. I think I am going to go with Lady Town just because I feel like it's one of the most different ones on this list. Like, I don't want to just pick one of the World War II ones because there are so many. If I end up really not vibing with one of these 3, then I think I'm actually going to go all the way down here and pick up either Secret Book of Flora Lee, River Sing Me Home, or Banyan Moon, because all those sound really interesting. So yeah, I guess that's historical fiction picks. Hello, so I've actually started the longest book that I'm going to be reading for this part. I've actually started it a month early because it is so long. It's like over 30 hours or something in terms of the audiobook. I am listening to it via audiobook because this is the book. This is The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese, and yeah, there's no way I can carry this absolute brick around with me, so I am doing this by audiobook, and it's actually narrated by the author himself, which is quite good. I like how because obviously he can give all the right sort of personalities that he wants to give to his characters. So yeah, he's actually pretty good as an audiobook narrator. I am enjoying him. I'm currently at about this part, which seems like I barely made a dent, but I am 130 pages in, and we've had the first part, which was set 1900s South India, which was basically about this young girl who is like 12. We meet her going on her wedding day, basically, to get married off to this widower who already has like a son who's about 2 years old, I think, and her adapting to that life. Obviously, it's kind of icky with how obviously young she is, but I did appreciate that at least her husband doesn't touch her or do anything of that kind of nature until she is older. Like, I wish she'd been a little bit older than she was. I think she was maybe, I want to say 15, 16 or so before he actually sleeps with her, but at least he was reasonably respectful and he did seem to like wait for her to be ready. So ickiness aside from that whole thing, like, I understand it's also probably just the culture of how it was for Indians at that time period, so I'm kind of trying not to put the modern day values onto it because it is kind of seen as the norm, even though like when he was at the wedding he was just like, she's a child, I don't want to marry a child, but it was kind of like a political marriage essentially that they did it. And then we eventually see her, I believe this is just the first part, but yeah, it goes over until she is, I want to say, late teens or so, and she eventually does have her own child, and not long after her child is born, it's a girl, the young boy who was the other son that already lived there, who got really attached to her. In terms of like family dynamics, like they actually were quite a sweet family in the end, which I was kind of unexpected. I was kind of expecting there to be like messy and dark, considering the whole arranged marriage thing that she gets put into. But actually, she takes to the little kid straight away, he takes to her. And her husband is actually quite nice and I guess quite open-minded, considering the time era, so it definitely could have been worse, I suppose. And then, spoilers I guess, this is still quite early on, but basically the son, Jojo, he's about 10 years old or something at this point, and he falls off something and he drowns in an irrigation puddle. And it is at this point that she finds out that there is like this curse or something that is on the family, which basically means that once per generation, one person in the family is going to die via drowning in some kind of way. I guess this is where you get the covenant of water from. And she is obviously quite horrified that she wasn't told about this when she got married into, especially now that she has a daughter of her own who now likely has the curse. So I was actually quite interested in this story. Like, the writing is actually really good and I was quite getting into it and I was really looking forward to seeing how that was going to progress. And then we've totally switched narrative, which has really confused me, to be honest. We've now switched forward to 1930s and we started off, I believe, in England. Yeah, we started off in Glasgow, following this guy called Digby, who is a surgeon. So yeah, this is part 2. So we've kind of hit like a different part here. I was reading the audiobook and there was no noticeable break, so I didn't realise that we'd suddenly gone to a different part. So that was like very threw me off. So we're on the next part now, starting from chapter 10, which is part 2, following Digby. And honestly, I'm not too interested in this one, I've got to say. It's a lot about him. He moves to Madras in India and he's kind of like this new surgeon at this hospital there, and he's trying to adapt to it, but there's an awful lot of intense explanation of various surgeries he does, and I get really icky with surgery stuff. It's kind of a bit of like a trigger no-no for me, so I'm just trying to get past this part. But I have just flicked forward and I've seen there's about another 40 or so pages of this, so it's shorter than the first part, and then we're getting part 3, which, oh okay, we're going back. Good. I was worried that we were not going to go back to the first part because I was actually quite invested in that, and I was really sad that we were now suddenly in a different part. And if I'm being honest, I care nothing about what's happening so far in Digby's part. He just seems kind of confused and is trying to find his place in this new hospital, but he's also a really good surgeon, I guess, so that is like a good thing for him. But I'm not loving the second part, unfortunately, whereas I was quite liking the first part. But I'm glad it does look like we are going to be going back to the first part because this is a multi-generational saga sort of book. I think we are going to be going forward in time, but yeah, I didn't appreciate the sudden abrupt change that we had. Oh, also there is a very cool map in here, which is nice. And yeah, I like how all the different parts have pictures, which is nice. Hang on, we've got another one here, part 6. So yeah, I like that, but overall I am quite liking it so far. I'm just not really enjoying the story or the characters in the second part, but the writing is really good. I'm listening to it, so I guess listenable is the word, but I want to say readable, which is good because this is big. I think this is, yeah, like 700-ish pages. But thankfully, yeah, it's actually quite good. I'm enjoying it so far, which is a relief because this was the one I was really worried I was gonna hate, and then it was gonna be a struggle to get through it. Yeah, it's quite good so far. So that is my first update for this one. I'm still kind of looking, I think I'm probably gonna enjoy Wayward more, but I'm glad that at least I'm having a decent time with this. And there is actually, it seems like a little bit of a supernatural threat going on with this potential curse that's going on with the family. I've yet to find out how Digby is going to link into this. Maybe he's going to get involved with trying to cure the family. I'm not really sure, but I guess I'll find out because I don't think he's a relative from what I can gather in terms of like his lineage. Like I think he's come from Glasgow and his mother is also from around there, so I don't think he's part of like that family from the first one, so I guess I'll find out. But yeah, that's my first update. Not bad so far, surprisingly enjoying it, and I will update you when I get further in, maybe to the halfway point, we'll see. So, a quick update. I am now halfway through Being Henry, which is Henry Winkler's biography. I'm doing it purely by audiobook because he did narrate it, and I do prefer to do that when a biography is actually narrated by the author. I'm not loving it, I've got to say. It's just kind of fine. There's a few things I have really liked, like for example, a couple of like places here and there we actually get Stacey Winkler, his wife, like come in and like say a few things from her perspective, which I think is quite nice. And there was a very touching little moment where we actually got to see through Henry's eyes Robin Williams' first acting debut as Mork on Happy Days, which was a really cool moment. But honestly, I'm not finding this really interesting, and if I'm being completely honest, I don't really like Henry that much. I find him to be quite an abrasive person, quite an immature person, quite a thoughtless person. I don't think his narrative is really engrossing. It's not bad, don't get me wrong. It's fine, me listening to it, but I don't think I'm going to remember any of it, and I don't think any of it's really hitting me emotionally, to be honest. So yeah, I think this one is going to be a little bit of a miss for me. Hopefully I will enjoy the other ones more. I have laughed a little bit, I'll say, like this is in the humour category. It was the winner for humour, but it's just fine. Okay, so I figured I should probably update you on how I'm going with the Covenant of Water, because I am at the 75% point now in this like 700 page plus book. I am still enjoying it, but I am enjoying it less, I think, as it's going on. Like, I think it was definitely sitting around a 4-star for me, and it's maybe sitting more as like a high 3. I think it's still really well written, but I think for me the storylines of the different characters we've been following I've been less interested in, as we've gone on. I've loved all the stuff with Big Armachi, like the initial first storyline. We have kept following on with this doctor guy, Digby, who I don't really enjoy him as a character. We've also been following this other doctor for a while, and now we're actually following along with a storyline with Big Armachi's son, Philippos, which has been quite a heartbreaking storyline, to be honest, but I've just really not been invested in the doctor's storylines at all. Like, I'm not really good with, like, medical stuff either, and there's been some quite, like, grotesque, in-depth medical things happening that is a bit of a struggle for me to get through. So I'm not enjoying it as much as I was. I've actually ended up picking the speed up on the audiobook to 1.5, which is actually, I realise now, the perfect speed for me to listen to it to. I didn't realise that the author does actually speak very slowly throughout it, and actually speeding it up to 1.5 is helping a lot, because it is now at like a reading level really for me in terms of him speaking it. So I've only got about 8 hours left to go now. It would have been about 15, I think, but that speeding up has really chunked it off a lot. So I think I will be finishing it this week. Yeah, I am liking it. I just am not as invested in it as I was at the beginning. And yeah, I don't think this is going to be one that I would pick up again, unfortunately, because I'm just not as interested in all of the different storylines that are going on. So yeah, a bit unfortunate, but I am still having a reasonably good time with it. I still want to finish it. I want to know where it's going. It's so long and there's so much going on. I feel like there's not a lot I can talk about in terms of the storyline, to be honest, but we are, I think, going to be culminating with finally looking into them breaking this curse that's on the family, but it has very much taken a backseat. And like, these two doctor guys are not actually relatives of the family. They are just characters that I think are going to basically probably be helping with breaking the curse. I assume that's where it's going, and at the moment one of the doctors has passed away and the Digby left, and he has actually met the family at this point. I don't think he's aware of the curse, but he was helping out. One of the doctors clearly has already seen the family as well, because of one of the daughter of Big Armachi has like a learning difficulty that he diagnosed for her, and then Digby has also now seen the family because he met with Philippus, and I think he was helping him with deafness or something. I don't really remember, to be honest, but there has been like a lot of tragedy also going on with the family in terms of Philippus's storyline. I was enjoying his storyline a lot. I appreciate where the romance has been like in this book, but it's kind of taking a bit of a dark twisted turn now, and I'm not enjoying where that's going. I am intrigued to see where it's gonna end, but I'm definitely less like emotionally invested in this now as I was when I started it, sadly. So yeah, that's how it's going. I am any day now going to be starting Wayward as well, and I'm really looking forward to be doing this. Is like obviously a much shorter book, so I think both of the historical books I've got, this one and Lady Town, are a lot shorter. But yeah, we'll see, and we'll see if I like this more, basically. So yeah, that is the update for now. The next time I update you, I probably will have finished Covenant of Water, and I'll be able to tell you my final thoughts on that book. So I can finally say it's been 10,000 years, but I have finished the Covenant of Water. I'm so glad that I started this book like way too early, because it's just so long, it's so chunky, and it is quite easy to read. I found it quite immersive. I didn't really have an issue with reading it and finding it like too complex, too dense, that kind of thing, but it's just so long. Towards the end of the audiobook, I'd say what would have been the last like 15 hours or so. I think this is like a 40-hour audiobook from what I remember. Towards the last 15 hours, I'd actually gotten so used to how Abraham narrates the book that, and he's quite slow, which I liked initially, but then he got to a point where I was like, I'm kind of ready for this to be done now. And he does speak slower, so I did speed him up a little bit, which did manage to shave off like a good like 7-8 hours or something from that. It really made a difference. So my thoughts. Overall, I quite liked this book. There was definitely parts of it that lost me, unfortunately, and I think a book as long as that, it's kind of expected. It's a shame that it lost me for entire parts of the book. Literally any parts that were to do with Digby and the other doctor, I've forgotten his name, but their parts totally lost me. Digby, I liked how it did all come together towards the end, I'll say that. I really liked our final protagonist that we have, who is the granddaughter of our original character that we started with. I really liked her character. I liked her character arc, even though like some of the stuff she had to go through was brutal and horrible and really shows up the kind of like the sexism in the field of surgery and how women weren't really seen as being able to do medicine at that time. But overall, yeah, I did quite like this book. I think it's not a 5-star. Part of me wants to say this is a 4-star because this book is so ambitious. It's so well connected with all the different parts. And I really genuinely loved like some of the storylines that was in it. Anything to do with Big Amachi, I loved. Anything to do with Big Amachi's granddaughter, I loved. I liked some of the side storylines as well, but I just really didn't enjoy when we focused on some of the more peripheral characters to the main family. And it went on that for quite a long way. And there was also a lot of surgical content, medical content. I believe Abraham himself is like a doctor, a surgeon, that kind of thing. So it makes sense why he's got this in here, why he has like 2-3 main characters basically that are all involved in the medical field. But I personally really struggled with the medical scenes because I'm just really not good with that kind of thing. It's like one of my like phobias basically, so I struggled to get through those parts. And yeah, I just didn't find the parts with the 2 male doctors that interesting, sadly. Like they did eventually have a point to where they linked back into the main storyline, but I just kind of wasn't here for it whenever we were in those parts. So I feel like that kind of means that my overall rating is going to be more of like a 3.75 because there were whole chunks of the book where I just didn't care. And it's a shame because I want this to be a 4. I did quite enjoy this. I may even re-listen to it in the future because I found the emotion and the way that Abraham writes to be just really, it just gets you immersed. Overall, this isn't a book that I would have picked up normally, but I did enjoy the main storyline. I enjoyed most, if not all, of the characters, and I did enjoy the writing. So I might be talking myself into a low 4 for this. I'm really not sure. I think I'm just going to have to see how I go with the other 2 historical books and kind of gauge it from there. I just feel like it was a really strong book, but it did lose me at times. And I feel like for me, for it to really fully lose me for maybe about like 5 hours or something in the audiobook, I just didn't care because those parts were quite long as well that were with Digby and with the other guy. I don't know if I can rate that a 4. So yeah, I'm going to hold my judgment on that for now until I get further into the video and just let it sit with me a bit. But I am feeling it's going to be more of a 3.75 at this point in time. So I have now started the second book in the historical, which is The Winner, Wayward by Amelia Hart. I am literally only about 2 chapters in. I did kind of start it by an audiobook, but I think I'm going to actually read this one physically because we've got like these 3 different timelines and I think I'm going to get a bit mixed up. So I am going to start this, but I'm finding it fine so far. I am intrigued of where it's going. There is so far a lot of commentary about the patriarchy and women within society in all 3 of the timelines that we're in. So we'll just see how it goes, I think. I'm going to be listening to Lady Town Circle of Women by audiobook. So yeah, I'll probably be also picking that one up soon just to kind of do like alongside, essentially. And then I've just got the last 2 humans. So yeah, the next time you'll see me, there will be an update, probably on Wayward, I imagine. So just the quickest of updates here, really. I have been listening to the audiobook of Lady Tan's Circle of Women because I just needed an audiobook. I'm already halfway through, and to be honest, for me, this book is just no thoughts, head empty. It's not bad. It's very listenable, readable. I don't know, it's just because I've read kind of similar stories before in terms of it being a lot about a girl growing up in China and that kind of traditional lifestyle that I'm just not really getting very much from it. I'm hoping we're going to get a little bit more soon with the medical side of it, with her like basically becoming a pharmacist of sorts. I really want this to give me Apothecary Diary vibes, and so far it's just giving me typical girl's life story. So I'm not loving it, I'm not hating it, it's just fine, which is not what I want it to be though. I want to love it. That is my thoughts so far. I'm hoping the second half will gear up and I will enjoy it more, but at the moment I'm not even gonna have a very good review because I just have no thoughts about this book. It just is. Right, well, next time I check in, I guess I'll have finished it. So we'll see, I suppose. Okay, here for a little update regarding Lady Tan's Circle of Women. I'm probably going to be finishing it like either today or tomorrow. I've got maybe 3 hours left of the audiobook. I'm over the halfway point now. I'm still very much feeling the no thoughts head empty, although I have been finding it more interesting as it's gone on, but I still don't really have a lot of thoughts, feelings, emotions about it. However, the chapter that I was just been reading, which I think is like oh my god, what is the chapter? I want to say it's like chapter 14, 15 or something. Basically, we're with the Empress in the palace now, and all the stuff that happened there, my god, what a clusterfuck. So that has definitely been the most interesting part so far, but like that is, yeah, the most I've been invested in it so far. Like, I don't want to say because big spoilers because we're so far into the book, but holy hell. Okay, a few more chapters in and we are finally in a mystery. We're actually finally feeling like Apothecary Diaries, which is lovely. I'm much more invested now, so that's nice. It's more than just daily life. We have an actual conspiracy going on. That's fun and I'm enjoying it more. Hello, another update time. Do you like my new earrings? They're kind of giving Christmas, more so giving fall. But I did indeed finish Lady Tan's Circle of Women, and it definitely got more interesting towards the end, and I did overall enjoy the second half of the book more than the first half, and it was fine. I liked reading it. I didn't have an issue reading it, but it's not one I think I'd ever go back to. I just don't think it was particularly memorable, and it was just fine. To be honest, I did appreciate the mystery that happened later on and how the resolution came about from that. But yeah, I think it was just fine. I am giving it a mid-3, I think. I am now on the final historical fiction, however wayward. I am just over the halfway point and I am loving this so far. I think this is going to be a 5-star. The writing is so easy. I'm loving all 3 of the stories, although please check trigger warnings for Violet. Violet's story is incredibly uncomfortable. I'm like, you know where it's going and it's just kind of torturous watching it play out. But basically in this book we are following 3 different women in 3 different time periods. We're following Alpha back in 1619, who is on trial for witchcraft, and the whole of her story is basically just about her being on trial. You don't know exactly if she's like actually killed someone or not, but the assumption is that she did, and that much like the other women in this book, they have been wronged by men and they are getting their revenge. Very happy to see what happened with Violet getting revenge later on. That was very good for her. So her story is perhaps not the most interesting in terms of like plot movement because it is just going through the trial, but I'm really enjoying it anyway because we're getting to see like a lot from like very introspective kind of stuff. And then Violet's one is taking place in 1942, and can I just say I'm so glad that we know from the future perspective that Violet is okay and she gets out and she has a much better life, because my gosh, what she goes through is awful. She's like this young girl who her father wants her to be more proper and stuff. She knows that her mother was basically seen as like uncanny and stuff. She hasn't figured out that her mother was a witch at this point, but like she's very close with nature. All three of them, they have this innate connection with nature and this being this powerful force that they kind of like connect with. The final perspective is we're following Kate in modern day, and she is basically escaping an abusive relationship where she's been trapped for years now, and she's escaping away to her great aunt Violet's cottage that's been left to her, and she's kind of just making a new life for herself. She's starting to find out about the witchcraft in her family and starting to connect to it herself. So yeah, I'm actually really enjoying all three perspectives. I'm appreciating all the commentary on here about women and men, and yeah, I'm just having a great time with it. Basically, I think this is easily probably going to be the best of the historical fiction that I've read, and I can see now why it's the winner. Okay, so I'm here to give you an update, and this is the last historical fiction of the three, Wayward. I did finish this. I actually finished this really fast, to be honest. I found this to be like a really gripping, immersive read, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a 5-star for me. I enjoyed all three of the storylines, even though I think Alpha's storyline is probably the weakest because so much of it is just introspection in her trial, but then it does kind of like you find out a lot more later on in her story, and I love how it weaves together Kate, Violet, Alpha, and how the predominant theme of this was kind of like there's a lot of feminine rage in this book, which I really enjoyed, I've got to say. So much of these women are basically being abused, downtrodden by men. Like all of them have had things taken away from them by men. So yeah, I enjoyed all the themes. I enjoyed like that link between them all and how it came to be about them embracing their power, get independence, to kind of punish the men for what was done to them. I just thought it was really good. I had a great time with this. This was, yeah, my favorite of the three, easily, I've got to say. So if we have to rate the three historical fiction, I think we would have Lady Tan's Circle of Women down here at the bottom, unfortunately. Not a bad book, it just wasn't as interesting a story as I was kind of hoping it was going to be. It was a lot more just daily life, stuff I've kind of read before, and then we did get a bit more of like a mystery later on that developed, and that was good, but again, it wasn't enough to raise it to more than like a 3.5, unfortunately. Covenant of Water for me is a 4-star. If I'd enjoyed every single story like perspective that we'd had, it may have made up to a 5-star. It's beautifully written, it's got some great plot in general. I loved a lot of the female characters, but I just didn't enjoy all the stuff with the doctors and some of the medical content. I found the doctor's storylines to be kind of boring. That comes to like a 4, low 4, mid 4 maybe, and then Wayward for me is the top with a 5. So I think we did pretty well, to be honest. In terms of the historical fiction, I did like all three of these. I would definitely read from Amelia Hart again. This is her debut, but she has got a new book coming out soon called Sirens. She's actually doing like a tour, and she's coming, I think, to Manchester, so I'm gonna try and go to that and like pick up her new book and hear her talk about the books, essentially. So yeah, really enjoyed this. Like, if you're really into feminine rage books, I guess this is a perfect one for that, as well as being beautiful written, having really interesting stories, characters, and you just really root for these characters, essentially. So yeah, that's what I've got to say about the historical guess. I had a good time with it. I guess we'll just see how it compares against the Humour books. So I had a change of plans as well. I just realized I forgot to talk about this. I actually did try to read Sure I'll Join Your Cult. I tried it by audiobook. I hated it. I couldn't get past the author's voice and the writing style. I lasted maybe 20 pages and I was like, this ain't for me. So I did have a look around and I picked up Strong Female Character by Fern Brady, which I think is going to be more interesting for me, to be honest. Once I realised the book wasn't about a cult, it kind of lost me, but this is a lot more interesting, I think. Again, this is kind of a memoir. I have heard good things about this. I've heard it's not particularly funny, so it's kind of a good one to test out the humour category with. And it's not hugely long. None of these are hugely long, to be honest. So I'm going to be reading this one now instead as my third book. Hello, so another update. I am on my second of the Humour books now, Fern Brady's Strong Female Character, and I'm finding this really easy to read so far, I've got to say. It's kind of split into chapters which are almost like mini stories, mini essays or something, and yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. I am like interested in all the things we're finding out about how people deal with autism, because this is also a book. Basically, she's a stand-up comic, but she was diagnosed with autism quite late in life, so like as an adult, which seems to be happening more and more often recently. I think like it was misdiagnosed as a child, and now she's kind of like finding out stuff about it, but she's kind of like resisting it because she's kind of hung up on the society's expectations of what it is to be autistic, and she's just like, that is not like an attractive thing to be seen as. But yeah, I'm actually finding it very readable, very not relatable as such, because obviously I'm not autistic, but I really like enjoying hearing Fern's point of view. I find it quite easy to understand. I think she's like telling her experience very well, which I'm enjoying. I am laughing at times. I don't know if I would call this a humour book, but it definitely has moments of comedy where I'm kind of laughing along with her. Enjoying it a lot more than the last one, at least. Hello, so another update, because I have finished my second humour book, Strong Female Character by Fern Brady, and I really enjoyed this one, I've got to say. This is a 4-star for me, I think. This was very readable, not necessarily relatable because I am obviously not autistic, but I really liked seeing things from her perspective. It made me understand so much more about what it is to live with autism, how they struggle with specific things, and I really liked seeing that. I learned so much from reading this book. And overall, whilst I'll say I did enjoy it, it was definitely very dark in tone a lot of the time. Like, it's more of a dark comedy, I'd say. And honestly, I don't think there was a lot of comedy in this. I feel like this was just kind of shoved into the humour category. And it's highly possible that when I get to the third book I have as well, Leslie Effing Jones, that this is going to be similar. Because this is not a book that is a comedy, I don't think. This is a memoir written by a stand-up comedian, and it is more a memoir and about her experiences. She went through so much crap. She has so much resilience, which I'm amazed how much resilience she has. Like, it honestly sounds so exhausting to live with autism, to experience the things she's experienced, to have everything around her, the system, her family, people that she knows, just society in general, just failing her every single step of the way because they don't understand. And it's very depressing, to be honest, because of that. And, you know, I'm glad that there's a lot more openness about this now. There's a lot more awareness around it, but it was really sad to see how she was someone who was really trying her best and how she was just getting knocked down every step of the way and seen as just like, you know, like a problem person. So it was less on the humour side, and I do wonder if this is going to be similar, to be honest, because again, this is a memoir by a stand-up comic. She is just talking about her life again, so I really don't think that it's gonna be as funny, but we'll see. I don't think that was the intention of Fern Brady when she wrote this book, to be really funny. Like, there's definitely elements of it where, you know, you laugh a little bit or you crack a smile, but she does deal with some really dark stuff. I really did enjoy this though. I absolutely flew through it. Like, each chapter felt so quick. Like, this is like just under 300 pages. It's only like 14 chapters or something. Like, you hear basically like everything from how it was for her to be a child, navigating school, her struggling for money in university and becoming a stripper, her eventually getting into comedy, and how just because she's kind of like made it, I suppose, now as a stand-up comic doesn't necessarily mean that her problems are over. She is still living with autism. She has only recently realized that she has autism and has acknowledged that. Yeah, overall, I did really like this, but I do think this is miscategorized. I do think this would do better in the memoir category than humour. As I said, I just don't think the humour category is great, but you know, at least I definitely enjoyed this more than Henry Winkler's book, thank God. Really enjoyed this. We'll be getting to this one soon, which will be the last book of this video, and I'm definitely intrigued about this one. The funny thing is that these are two stand-up comics, and my friend recognized both of them, and I don't know either of them because I don't really watch a lot of comedy in general, let alone like stand-up comics and stuff, but I am definitely interested to read this one as well. This one came second after all, so it did much better than this one. I will see, I guess. At the moment, I've read all 3 of the historical fiction. I have the feeling at the moment historical fiction is going to be beating humour because I just really didn't like the Henry Winkler book. Like, I know I gave it a 3. I'm kind of on retrospection tempted to give it a 2 because I just did not care. But yeah, hopefully I will like this one and I will check in once I've started it, I guess. So I figured I should give you an update on Leslie effing Jones because I started it yesterday, I want to say, maybe the day beforehand, and I am like halfway through already. This has been such an easy read. Leslie writes in such an engaging sort of way that just makes you want to keep on going. And even though, like, once again we are dealing with some darker topics, like things that happened to her in the past are not exactly pleasant, her writing style, her personality just really shines through. I also realized, like, I thought I didn't know who Leslie Jones was. It turns out I do. I totally, like, didn't realize until I was looking up some stuff about her and I saw some pictures and I realized that she was involved in Our Flag Means Death and that she's also been a guest judge quite a few times on RuPaul's Drag Race, and me and my flatmate always loved her whenever she was on. So I do actually know who she is now. I went and watched a couple of her stand-up stuff just to kind of get a vibe for her as well, and I quite like her stand-up stuff as well. I think she's absolutely hilarious. In terms of what I'm feeling about this so far, of the 3 books, it's probably the one that has made me like chuckle the most. There's definitely more humor in this, but once again, this is a memoir. It's an autobiography and it is her talking about the events that happened in her life, which are not always funny, and I think even Leslie knows that she can't make everything a joke that happened to her in her life. I'm at the chapter 7 mark at the moment where she is like actively pursuing her comedian career now. Like, she is starting to like make it as a stand-up comic despite so many things just kind of going against her. I found like watching her like grow up in this was so interesting because again, she was so honest about how she was as like a teenager and how she was a more troubled teen, how she would get into fights easily, how she just won't take crap from people, and people basically were afraid of her because she intimidated them, and that was kind of how she made it. I think she's probably learning to be softer, I suppose, now in future through doing something that she truly loves, which is comedy. Prior to that, she was kind of pursuing basketball, which she was good at, but she just didn't have passion for. So yeah, overall, I am quite liking this. I don't think this is going to be a 5-star. I think this is just going to be like a good read that I have a good time with, and it's probably not going to really stick with me if I'm honest, but I am liking it. So that is that. Hello, so I am here to finally finish this video off. I did indeed yesterday finish Leslie effing Jones by Leslie Jones, and overall I had a really good time with this book. I sadly don't think it's anything that's really gonna stick with me, and I think I'm probably going to rate it just slightly lower than Strong Female Character because I feel like I learned so much about autism through reading that book, whereas I don't know if I really learned all that much. It's really just about Leslie and what makes Leslie great and her life and how she got to where she was today, and it's fine. I always feel kind of silly rating a memoir because you can't really rate somebody's life, but overall I would say this was just fine. How interestingly though, I was on Goodreads putting this on there to say I'd read it, and I saw that a lot of people were talking about how the audiobook is really different, and that is really truly what makes Leslie shine, because she actually narrates the audiobook, and I feel like she only very loosely says what she says in this book, and people were saying that the audiobook was on a whole other level and that this was just kind of pulled together with like a ghostwriter or something, and the audiobook is like vastly different. So I kind of want to try the audiobook now to see what that's like, because I'm wondering if the audiobook was actually the way to go with this. I'm not going to do this for this challenge because I'm just not, but that's really interesting, because if that is the case, then I'm wondering if that is one of the reasons why, like apart from the fact that Leslie Jones is very popular as a stand-up comedian anyway, why this managed to get to 2nd place in the Goodreads, because I thought it was fine, but it didn't like blow me away. It was just a good book. It was a good memoir. And I liked it, I enjoyed it, but I'm probably never going to pick it up again. I'm probably going to forget most of it almost straight away, essentially. I would rate this probably a mid-3, maybe going up to a high 3. It was good, it was a good time. I have not really much in the way of complaints about it. It's just not one that's going to stick with me. And I do wonder, if the audiobook was the better way to go with this. So maybe I'll find that out one day. So that does mean though that I have finally read all the books for this video of Humour versus historical. I would say I really did have a mixed time overall with this challenge. Let me actually do the rating of the Humour first, just to get that out of the way. I'm just checking in case there were any others that I read from this category. No, I tried to read Sure I'll Join Your Cult and it was not for me. So that isn't even gonna be rated because I read like 10 pages and was like, this ain't me. So I think for me personally, Being Henry has to be at the bottom spot. I really didn't like that. I've since reduced my rating down to a 2 stars. It just didn't work for me. Unfortunately, I didn't really like Henry Winkler. I obviously suffered, I think, from not having pre-knowledge of who he was as a Fonz and his career, so it just wasn't for me at all. So that is going to be my bottom rating. Then we'll have Leslie effing Jones, which overall did quite like it, really enjoyed it. Would probably recommend it to people that kind of like her and be like, check out her memoir, it's good. Just isn't going to be one that really sticks out for me. And then at the top, we're going to go with Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is a low 4. I think may even be a high 3 to be honest on reflection, because after having like had a break from it now, I've already forgotten most of it, but I think it was better than the Leslie Jones one, so this is going to be the winner for me. But overall, I didn't really have an amazing time with the humour category. Again, I don't think the humour is a good term at all. I just don't like this genre as being a genre in itself, because I don't think it makes sense. So looking back then at what I thought of historical fiction, I honestly had a very mixed time with that as well. I read what was basically the top 3 books. Oh, I will say there's probably only like 1 or 2 other books in the humour category that I would actually bother to read. I would probably check out Quietly Hostile. If I'm honest, nothing else here really appeals to me that much, so I can't really see me checking out anything else from that category. Historical, however, there are definitely other books that I think I would check out. I obviously read the top 3 here, but I would definitely read The Echo of Old Books. Did You Hear About Kitty Carr is another one I'm quite interested in. The Secret Book of Flora Lee was another one. Ironically, most of the ones that were like right at the bottom of the list, River Sing Me Home, Banyan Moon, Northwoods, they're all ones I'm also interested in reading, funnily enough. So I think there's definitely more like future for me here in terms of reading historical. I realized as well, looking at this, I rated the historical books exactly the same as how they were rated in the Goodreads awards. Like Laytown Circle of Women was my last place position, which was 3rd. Then Covenant of Water, which was a 4 for me, and Wayward, which was my only 5-star for this video. So yeah, that is it. Honestly, I did not read the best books in this video. I think I really only thoroughly loved Wayward, and everything else was either decent or just fine, and then I didn't like Being Henry. So not the most exciting books, I think, in terms of this video, but I am, however, really excited for we're going to be going for the final video, which is going to be a 3-way genre battle. Suffice to say, I think just because I don't get the humour category anyway, historical has to be the winner for me. But even then, I'm a little bit like, Speaking of, actually though, I did say in my last video that I would go back to Wayward because it won the debut category as well, and I want to see if I think it deserved that now that I have actually also done the debut category. So for the debut category, I obviously read English as Described, I read Monstrilio and Shark Heart, and you know what, none of those were 5 stars. Like, In Books as Described was my favourite of the video. I think I gave it high 4. Definitely on reflection, it's not a 5-star. I really had a good time with it, but I just don't think it was, I don't know, if depth to really stick with me that much afterwards, whereas Wayward definitely does. So I would agree as well that Wayward winning the debut category, I would agree with that. So that is it for this video. You will next see me likely in January sometime. I am like halfway through this final video, but I am reading 9 books for that video, not just 6. So there is a lot more to be getting through. And of course, one of those categories is fantasy, which we know is chunky. So you will likely see that video sometime in January. I'm working hard on it, but I don't see me actually being able to finish it before the end of the year, but I'll have almost finished it. I hope you enjoyed this. As always, feel free to check out the other videos in this playlist if you're interested, and stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!